God's people had a new land. Now, they wanted a king because that's what all the other people around them used to rule their lands. But God is your king, Samuel told them. He is the one who looks after you best. We want a real king, they said, one we can see. God knew that kings might not be kind to his people or look after them as well as he would. But God's people didn't care. They wanted a king, and they wanted him now. So God gave them a king. He was called Saul, and he seemed like a good king at first. But he became proud and stopped listening to God. And so God found them a new king, and his name was David. And though David was a great king in many ways, he had a heart just like God's. He definitely wasn't perfect. He did some pretty terrible things. He even murdered a man. No, David made a big mess of his life. But God can take even the biggest mess and make it work in his plan. I need a new heart, Lord, David prayed, because mine is full of sin. Make me clean inside. God heard David's prayer. He forgave David and made David a promise. I will make you great, David, and one day a king will be born in your family, and he will heal the whole world. But there were many kings after David, and they were a mixed bag at best. Even when the best kings were in charge, rulers who loved God's guidance and had divine wisdom, even they disobeyed God and decided to do things their own way rather than God's way. God's people, Israel, were warned by their prophets, people whose job it was to listen to God and then tell the people what they heard, that these choices would lead them back into slavery, just like they were in Egypt so many years ago. They'd have to leave their home, everything they knew and everything they loved, to live in exile in a foreign land as conquered people. And sure enough, that's exactly what happened. But God did not leave his people. He was with them. Even when they were far from home, he was looking after them. Eventually, after many years, God brought his people back home from being slaves. They had forgotten how God wanted them to live or who they were supposed to be. So, Ezra and Nehemiah read them the rules God had given Moses all those years ago. But as they heard those rules read aloud to them, it made them very sad. It was like he was holding a mirror to them, showing them what they were like, and they didn't like what they saw. They saw they had not been living the way they should. Ezra looked at the people, and instead of telling them how angry God was with them, he closed the book of the law and said, "We're having a party." And so they did. All day, they listened to the stories about the wonderful things God had done for his people, how he had made the world, how he spoke to Moses and showed them a special land, how he had rescued them no matter what, time after time, over and over again, because of his deep love for his people. They remembered how God had always, all through the years, been loving his children, keeping his promise to Abraham, taking care of them, forgiving them, even when they disobeyed, even when they ran away from him, even when they thought they didn't need him. But now the time had almost come for the best part of God's plan. God himself was going to come, not to punish his people, but to rescue them. God was getting ready to wipe away every tear from every eye, and the true party was just about to begin. Get ready to draw. Israel had a mix of both good kings and bad kings, and King David was an example of both. Draw King David, praying for a clean heart. The prophets were people who listened to God and then told the people how they weren't living right. And sometimes they did pretty crazy things to get people's attention. Draw a prophet, warning the people. Have you ever felt homesick? That's how Israel felt when they had to leave their home. Draw the people leaving their city behind. Were they sad? Were they crying? When the people returned, they had a big party, remembering the stories of God's faithfulness to them. Draw the people rejoicing after they returned home to the city. Thank you so much for your hard work and creativity so far. We love seeing your art. Keep it coming.